Meet Ray, 34 years old, decent job, and after 10 years of unglamorous saving, packed lunches, a car he's kept way past its warranty, and a firm refusal to ever pay full price for anything, he's built up $180,000. His one goal in life is simple. He doesn't want his kids to start from zero the way he did. He wants to hand them something. A head start, real generational wealth. That's the dream for almost everyone watching this. And it's the exact same dream one particular family had back in 1877 when the richest man in America died. His fortune was worth about $15 million, more than the entire U.S. Treasury held at the time. 96 years later, 120 of his descendants gathered for a family reunion. Not one of them was a millionaire. Here's the number that should stop you. If that fortune had simply stayed invested and been left mostly alone, it would have been worth roughly $5 billion by that reunion. That's about $40 million for every single person in the room. Instead, nothing. It wasn't a stock market crash. It wasn't even taxes, which is everyone's first guess. It was something much simpler and much more avoidable. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what it was and exactly how to make sure it never happens to your family. Whether you're starting with $180,000 like Ray or $18,000. Let's get into it. Ask most people why family fortunes disappear, and they'll say taxes. The government takes a huge cut when you die, takes another cut when your kids die, and after 2 or 3 generations, there's nothing left. It's a clean story. It's also wrong for almost everyone watching this. Here's the actual law, as it stands right now. The federal estate tax exemption is $15 million per person, $30 million for a married couple, and it's permanent, adjusted for inflation every year. Below that number, the federal government takes zero. So unless you're planning to leave more than $15 million behind, the estate tax simply isn't the thing that unravels what you've built. For the vast majority of people, it never enters the picture at all. Now, to be fair, some states do have their own estate or inheritance tax, and a handful of them kick in much lower, sometimes starting around $1 to $2 million. So depending on where you live, a smaller state-level tax bill can show up earlier than you'd expect. But even then, the rates are nowhere near large enough to wipe out a family's wealth on their own. So if it's not the tax man, what is it? Money doesn't usually disappear in one dramatic event. It bleeds out slowly through a handful of gaps that most families never even think to close, because they assume those things are only for the ultra-rich or for lawyers or for someday. They're not. And understanding this starts with one simple number. There's a single number that decides whether a pile of money is temporary or permanent, and almost nobody is ever taught it. Take any amount of money. Call it your family's pot. Every year, it earns some return. Let's use 5%, a reasonable long-term number for money that's invested sensibly. Now, the family spends money out of that pot every year too. As long as what they spend is less than what the pot earns, the money grows forever. It's basically immortal. But the moment the family spends more than the pot earns, a countdown begins. And it's not a slow, forgiving leak. It has a fixed end date. Let's put real numbers on this. Say Ray eventually builds his savings up to $2 million, earning 5% a year. That's $100,000 a year in growth. If Ray's family lives on exactly $100,000 a year, the money never runs out, ever. But watch what happens the moment they go just a little over that line. At $120,000 a year, only 20% more than the sustainable amount, that same $2 million runs completely dry in 37 years, less than a single lifetime. Push it to $150,000 a year, and it's gone in 23 years. At $200,000, double the sustainable line. The whole fortune hits zero in just 15 years. One generation, and it's gone. And here's the part that matters most. This works exactly the same way at any size. Take $200,000 instead of $2 million. Same 5% return. The sustainable line is $10,000 a year. Spend $12,000 a year, 20% over the line, and it disappears in that exact same 37 years. The size of the pile doesn't change the shape of the countdown. It only changes how long the countdown takes to run out. A modest family sees it happen in a decade. A massive fortune can absorb the overspending for almost a century before it finally hits zero. But the direction is identical, and it's decided by one comparison: what the money earns versus what the family spends. That's exactly what happened to the family from the start of this video. It wasn't the estate tax. They simply spent, generation after generation, far past what even a fortune that size could earn. So everything else we're about to talk about exists for one reason: to keep a family on the right side of that line and to protect the pile from the things that can knock it across that line without warning. Here's where most people get it slightly wrong. Families who actually keep their wealth don't just hand their kids a stack of cash or shares with their name on it. They put the money inside a structure, a trust, a family entity, something with rules, and the kids inherit a relationship to that structure, not raw, personal property. Now, the common myth is that splitting money between kids is what destroys it, that dividing a fortune is somehow the problem, and keeping it all in one pot magically prevents that. That's not actually true, and the math backs this up. $2 million held together, spent at its limit, and that same $2 million split 3 ways, with each person spending their fair share, both hit zero at exactly the same time. Splitting the money isn't the killer on its own. So why does structure actually matter? 3 real reasons. First, discipline. When 3 people each own their slice outright, they each spend to their own lifestyle, and nobody's watching the total. Quietly, their combined spending creeps past what the whole pot earns, and the countdown starts without anyone deciding it should. A shared structure with rules forces everyone to measure against one number together. Second, access. A large pool of money earns more than 3 small ones do. Better investment access, lower fees, better diversification. Break that $2 million into 3 pieces of roughly $667,000, and each smaller share tends to earn a bit less. Drop the return from 5% to 3%, and the survival window shrinks right along with it. Third, protection. Money held personally is exposed to lawsuits, divorces, and creditors. Money held properly inside a structure is insulated, so one family member's bad decade doesn't drain the whole family's future. This isn't just a rich family trick, by the way. Even Ray, with his $180,000, can apply the same logic on a small scale. The moment he owns a house, a small investment account, or even a small family business, the same question applies. Does it pass to his kids as personal property to fight over, or inside something with rules attached? Here's a distinction most people never think about. Owning something and controlling something are not the same thing. Confusing the two is exactly how good assets get destroyed. Picture a small family business with 3 equal partners, each of them free to sell their share whenever they want. Sounds fair? It's actually a time bomb. The day one of them sells to an outsider, the other 2 are suddenly in business with a total stranger, someone who votes their own way, blocks decisions, or pushes the business in a direction nobody else wanted. And it gets worse because everyone knows that share can be sold or seized, which makes the whole business a target. A creditor sees something to grab. A lawsuit sees something to win. A divorce sees something to divide. The fix isn't to make selling impossible. Sometimes someone genuinely needs the cash, and trapping them just creates a different disaster. The fix is to make it deliberately harder, not impossible. A simple rule, like the family gets the first right to buy you out at a fair price before you sell to anyone outside, solves this. The person who needs cash still gets it. The stranger with a checkbook never gets a seat at the table. And notice what this quietly solves. The real reason families are forced to sell a good asset usually isn't that they need cash. It's that they don't have access to cash without selling. A family with the right structure builds that access in ahead of time, often by borrowing against what they own rather than selling it outright. So the thing that makes them wealthy never has to be given up just to raise money. Here's the system that would have saved the most family fortunes in history, and it costs nothing but the decision to actually write things down. Picture 2 siblings who inherit a business worth $5 million. No written rules, just shared ownership and good intentions. One wants to reinvest and grow it. The other wants their share in cash now. Neither one is wrong. They just want different things, and nothing on paper says how to settle it. Then life happens. A divorce, a creditor, an emergency. With no rules for how the business handles a member who suddenly needs money, the only option left is the biggest one: sell the whole thing. And a business sold under pressure on somebody else's timeline never sells for what it's actually worth. If that forced sale brings in even 60 cents on the dollar, $5 million becomes $3 million. 40% gone. Not because the business was bad, but because there were no rules for a bad moment. That page of rules has a name: a family agreement, or in bigger families, a family constitution. Instead of handing your kids raw ownership, you hand them rules. How someone takes money out, how someone borrows against their share, how someone who needs out gets bought out fairly, and above all, that no single person can force a sale in a moment of crisis. The best time to write those rules is right when you first set things up. The second best time is when everyone's calm, not in the middle of the very crisis the rules are meant to prevent. The third best time is today. Every system so far has been about the money. This last one is about the people, and it's the one families skip most often, usually to their own regret. Here's a small, slightly uncomfortable idea. Think twice before paying your kids for chores. It seems harmless, even responsible, but it quietly teaches one lesson. That work is the annoying thing you put up with in order to get paid. And that lesson adds up. A kid who learns that work is a punishment grows into an adult who sees family money as an escape from work rather than something to look after. And that's exactly the kind of person who ends up spending past the line. Families who keep their wealth do something different. They don't pay for chores. They help their kids build actual skills that create value. A small, real project, a first investment with real stakes, something the kid genuinely cares about. The lesson flips completely. Money is what you earn by creating something people actually want, and managing money well is a skill you practice, not a windfall that just shows up. 3 things are worth passing down, in this order. First, genuine interest in something real, because that's what keeps someone in the game at all. Second, actual skills, the ability to build, to work, to manage money, not just spend it. And third, character, an understanding that there's something bigger than yourself, which is where real generosity comes from. A generation raised with those 3 things can hold on to what it's handed. A generation handed only money and nothing else does exactly what untrained heirs have always done. It spends past the line and wonders later where it all went. So, let's go back to that reunion. 120 descendants and not a single millionaire. Run the math forward, and that original fortune, left alone, should have been worth billions by the time they all sat down together. Every person at that table should have inherited millions. Instead, nothing. No market crash did that. No tax collector did that. There was no structure holding their total spending under what the money earned. There was no discipline coordinating the family as one. Nobody had been trained to see it coming, because the money had simply always been there. Here's what should really land. None of the 4 things we talked about today need $100 million to matter. The survival line is just as real at $2 million or $200,000 or raise $180,000. It's simply your money multiplied by what it earns compared to what you spend. The structure, the rules, the training, those are just the tools that keep your family on the right side of that number long after you're not around to enforce it anymore. Generational wealth was never really about a private island or a massive trust fund. It's a family that knows its number and has rules in place to stay under it, even after the person who built it is gone. If this helped you actually understand generational wealth, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep breaking down exactly how money is built and kept, one video at a time. And drop a comment. What's the one thing you want to make sure you pass down to your kids? Money, a skill, or something else entirely?